I ain't never really heard you say no bullshit about Woody.
Nah, because not even to speak on like a certain community, Woody like take medicine. Woody like, you know what I'm saying? He throw it off a little bit. He off a little bit. So I always look at anything he do like a kid, like my son. Like he don't got the functioning brain that we got. Woody take real medicine. So I ain't even.
Sound like you got a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but that's just.
Young Thug just took a shot at his former right-hand man on camera, trying to play it off as a joke, but he clearly doesn't realize the gravity of what he's just started. Before we dive into Woody's reaction, we need to look at exactly what was said and the history behind it. This isn't just any rapper talking trash. This is the specific individual Woody went to federal court for. This is the man whose leaked interrogation tapes put Woody in the spotlight. And the same person Woody risked everything for while sitting on that witness stand in front of a judge, a jury, and the entire city of Atlanta. Now, Thug is publicly calling him slow, and the level of disrespect is honestly staggering. But the real story is how Woody responded. When you hear his comeback, you'll see that this situation is far more complicated than it appears on the surface. On one hand, you have Thug questioning this man's mental state, while on the other, you have Woody, a man who has years' worth of receipts. And in this world, those receipts can be dangerous. Let's break this down from the start, because to understand why this fallout is about to get so ugly, you have to understand the deep-rooted history between these two, and that history is rooted in blood, bullets, and a loyalty that unfortunately only flowed one way. To really get this, we have to go back to 2013. Atlanta was buzzing, and Young Thug was right on the verge of super. Danny Glover had just dropped. Stoner was taking over the city, and even Drake was spinning his tracks at All-Star Weekend. Thug was ascending fast, but over in the streets of Mechanicsville, there was a man named Kenneth Copeland, better known as Lil Woody. Now, Woody wasn't a rapper or an industry insider. He was a legitimate street figure who had already been through the trenches. He lost his father at 10, his mother at 17, and was kicked out of school the very day he returned after her funeral. By the time he linked up with Thug, he'd already lived through hell twice over. But there's one thing you have to understand about Woody And. He said this himself. He wasn't a follower. He moved by his own code. He wasn't in the studio chasing clout or trying to be famous. When Thug reached out and told him to come ride, Woody showed up as a man of the streets who moved a specific way. Thug needed that presence. See, back in 2014, Thug had the talent and the momentum, but he was also deep in heavy beefs with Lil Wayne, YFN, and people from the Inglewood family. He was moving in circles where having a crash dummy, someone truly about that life, wasn't just an asset. It was a necessity. Lil Woody became exactly that. Thug's personal shooter and the man who handled business whenever movement was required, no questions asked. But here's where the situation gets truly wild. That loyalty was never a two-way street. Woody was the one out there risking his life and catching charges. He was the one getting shot at, seeing his family's home targeted, and getting pulled over by the police on a daily basis. While all that was happening, Thug was safe in the studio, dropping hits and becoming a millionaire. Meanwhile, Woody ended up in federal prison serving 51 months on a single gun charge. There was no high-priced lawyer provided by Thug, no real financial support, nothing. So, when Thug sits on a podcast and calls this man slow or claims he has the brain of a child, it's more than just a typical it's a slap in the face to years of one-sided loyalty. But before we dive into Woody's actual response, we have to address the most controversial chapter of this story. This is the part where half of Twitter is ready to label Woody a rat, while the other half, those who actually sat through the trial, know that the truth is far more complicated than a simple label. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, because this entire Fudan Thug calling Woody slow revolves entirely around the YSL trial and what went down on that witness stand. I'm going to give you the timeline straight, with no spin. It all goes back to January 2015, when a violent beef erupted between YSL and YF, Unrich Homie Quant's camp. At the center of the conflict was a man named Big Nut, a high-ranking Bloods member from the Englewood family. After a club incident involving allegedly stolen jewelry, a green light was issued. On January 10, 2015, a drive-by shooting occurred at a local barber shop. Big Nut was killed. A 14-year-old was shot in the leg, and another young man in his 20s was also hit. As Nut lay dying, his own brother was right there, and Nut reportedly told him, "Thug had me killed." That single accusation became the foundation for the entire YSL RICO case. Eventually, Woody was picked up and interrogated multiple times. Throughout 2015, inside those interrogation rooms, he started talking. He gave the police details about Thug, the rental car used, and the specifics of the situation. But here is the part people often overlook. In those same sessions, Woody was also feeding them information that simply wasn't true. He admitted it himself while under oath in open court, stating that he was simply saying whatever was necessary to get out of that interrogation room. His logic, and I'm paraphrasing here, was that when you're dealing with investigators, you'll tell them anything just to get them off your back. Fast forward to 2022. when the RICO case finally drops. 28 people are indicted, with Young Thug named as the leader of Young Slime Life. The state of Georgia decided that their star witnessed the one person who could link Thug to the rental car used in Nuts' murder was Lil Woody, but there was a major problem. Woody had no intention of testifying. He told his lawyers, he told the prosecutors, and he even tried to plead the fifth. He actually went to jail for a weekend, rather than take the stand. He fought them every step of the way, but they eventually forced him to testify under immunity. And what did he do once he got up there? He called himself a liar. He claimed he made everything up and contradicted the very foundation of the prosecution's case. He became the absolute worst witness the state could have imagined. Was that the street code kicking in? Was he finally telling the truth? Or was he a man who genuinely believed Thug was innocent? Or was it something else entirely? That is the question the hip-hop community has been debating for the last 2 years. Personally, and feel free to disagree, believe what Woody did on that stand was consistent with his behavior since 2015. He was looking out for himself first, and by doing so, he ended up protecting Thug, whether that was a calculated move or just the byproduct of a man with a troubled past trying to survive is up to you to decide. The bottom line is that Young Thug received time served and walked out of jail. The state's case essentially collapsed, largely because their star witness took the stand and dismantled his own credibility. Now, Thug is turning around and calling that same man slow. Just let that sink in for a moment. Now, let's get into Woody's actual response. But first, you need to understand the context. When Vlad TV sat down with Woody after the trial Thug was released and the dust had settled, he had a lot to get off his chest. Listen closely to how he speaks and the points he makes. He says straight up that he never wanted to be on that stand. They forced him. He claims he told them repeatedly, "I lied. I told them I made it all up. I tried to plead the fifth." They gave him immunity and dragged him into that courtroom anyway. He claims that when it came to Thug walking free, he actually prayed for it. He said he thanked God because he never wanted to see the man go down. Now, you can look at that two ways. Either it's the most genuine statement a man in his position has ever made, or it's the most calculated PR move in street history. Regardless of what you believe, one thing is certain, he has been consistent every single time. He's opened his mouth since that trial ended. But now we have to circle back to Thug's recent comments and how Woody handled them. When Woody heard that Thug went on a podcast and described him as a slow child, someone who needs medication, or someone without a functioning brain, he didn't explode. He didn't go on Instagram Live, and he didn't go looking for a confrontation. Instead, he spoke with a level of calmness, knowing exactly what kind of information he's sitting on. And that right there, that composure is far more dangerous than any outward threat. Because Woody knows things that could change everything. Woody has the receipts. And he's already proven that when his back is against the wall, he doesn't fold the way people expect him to. He said something in a different context that really stuck with me. In 2 years, a whole lot of folks have lost their lives or ended up in jail, while everyone else is just in the club, partying. He was talking about the senselessness of it, all the people who stayed loyal while everyone else moved on. That's exactly what's behind Woody's eyes when he hears Thug call him slow. It isn't confusion or hurt feelings. It's the look of a man doing the math on a debt that was never paid. Alright, let's look at this a bit deeper, because the situation between Thug and Woody isn't just a simple beef. It's a case study in how loyalty actually works in, how it fails in the streets. Think about Woody's own words. Betrayal doesn't happen because it was always in your mind. It happens because of circumstances. That is one of the most honest things I've heard about street relationships in a long time. You don't get close to someone planning to cross them. You get close, you ride for them, and you put in the work. But then the circumstances change, and people finally show you who they really are once the pressure is on. Woody truly showed up for Thug. Real talk, he was there long before the fame. Back when they were just in the streets, he was the one literally taking bullets at his own baby mama's house. His family's homes were being shot up because of situations directly connected to YSL business. Yet, while Woody was locked up, Thug wasn't sending lawyers, he wasn't sending money, and he wasn't protecting Woody's family. Then that interrogation footage leaked. Woody claims the state leaked it to pressure him, not the defense. After fighting it for years and even going to jail for a weekend instead of testifying, he was finally forced onto that stand. And what did he do? He dismantled the state's entire case. Whether you want to call that loyalty or just self-preservation, the outcome was the same. Thug went home. But then Thug goes on a podcast and calls him slow. That's not just disrespectful, it's actually telling on himself. By trying to paint Woody as mentally unfit, Thug is essentially saying this man wasn't credible enough to testify against him. But here's the flaw in that logic. In the end, Woody wasn't testifying against Thug at all. He was the primary reason the state's case collapsed. So, what is the real motivation behind Thug going after Woody like this? Is it because Woody has started doing interviews and sharing his story publicly? Is it because Woody is building a platform off everything that transpired? Or is it something deeper? Perhaps it's the discomfort of knowing that the one man who knows everything, who is there for it, all is still out here, still talking, and hasn't even begun to scratch the surface of what he actually knows. Let me remind you of something Woody said during his interview with Vlad. When asked if there were things he was holding back until the trial ended, Woody looked directly at the camera and said, "Not on this camera, because it's going to be for free." Think about that for a second. That means there is more. It means Woody is sitting on a massive catalog of information that hasn't been made public yet. And as long as Thug keeps poking him, calling him slow, and dismissing him in front of the world, the likelihood of that catalog being opened only increases. This is a chess move that Thug may not have fully thought through. Now, I titled this video "It's Getting Deadly" for a reason. I need to explain exactly what I mean by that. Because I'm not just talking about some rap beef or a couple of diss tracks. I'm talking about the real-world stakes of publicly calling out a man like Lil Woody. Think about Woody's life for a second. This is a man who has been shot at, whose baby mama's house was sprayed with bullets, and who lost his brother to the streets. He's done 2 terms in federal prison, been through state prison, survived a stabbing behind bars, and handled countless fights while locked up. This isn't someone who just reacts out of raw emotion. This is a man who has survived situations that would break most people. On top of that, he's actively building a new life. He's doing interviews, speaking at law schools, and growing his own platform. He walked away from the streets by choice, not because he was forced out. So, when someone with a platform as massive as Young Thug's tries to publicly demean him, the question isn't whether Woody's feelings are hurt. The question is, what is his next move? What does he decide to reveal or keep hidden? Because here's the reality with men like Woody. When you back them into a corner in front of the world, you force their hand. And Woody has made one thing very clear. He has the receipts, and he has the stories. He is sitting on information he withheld from the trial, the interviews, and the public record. Thug's comments didn't just disrespect a man. They potentially untied the leash on someone who has been actively choosing to remain silent. That choice to stay quiet has arguably protected Thug more than anything his lawyer, Brian Steele, ever did in a courtroom. Think about it. Woody could have said so much more on that witness stand. He could be doing weekly interviews right now, dropping specific details about the rental car, the McDonald's meeting, or who knew what and when, but he hasn't. He's been measured. He's been focused on building his own brand, yet here is Thug, publicly calling him a mentally slow child on a podcast. Woody's response remains calm, and that calmness is more unsettling than any outward threat. I've seen enough real-world street situations to know that the most dangerous moment isn't when someone is shouting. It's when they get quiet, when they smile, and when they say it's all good before walking away. That is exactly when you need to start paying attention. Woody isn't shouting, and he isn't venting on Instagram Live. He's staying composed. And that's the part that should actually make people nervous. Let's zoom out for a second, because this situation between Woody and Thug is bigger than just 2 people beefing. It's a perfect example of what happens when relationships built on street loyalty collide with the real world, and the real world wins. Woody said something that I keep coming back to. He mentioned that he wishes he could go back in time and join the army. He even said the only way he can fall asleep is by watching military movies. Think about that. This is the same man the internet labeled a rat, the same man the streets called a snitch, and the same man who stood on that witness stand and dismantled a massive prosecution. This man's actual dream was to serve his country. Instead, he grew up in Mechanicsville without a father, lost his mother at 17, suffered a head injury that affected him his entire life, and was kicked out of school the very first day he returned after his mom passed away. He ended up in the streets because that was simply what was available to him. That's the deeper story that gets completely lost when people just dismiss him by saying, "Oh, Woody snitched." That is the humanity that disappears when we reduce people to their worst moments. Now, does that mean everything Woody did in those interrogation rooms was right? That's not my call to make. That's between him and whoever he answers to. But what I will say is this: the man has been consistent. He's been honest about what he did and why he did it. And he isn't out here pretending to be something he's not. Then you have Thug. Thug is sitting on a podcast free, alive, and with his career intact in large part because of how things went down on that witness stand. Yet he's calling the man slow. That is the part of the street code that nobody wants to talk about. The people who benefit most from loyalty are often the ones who honor it the least once the smoke clears. Real recognize real. And right now, from where I'm standing, the scoreboard looks a lot different than the popular narrative. Woody was the crash dummy, the shooter, the face in the interrogation room, and the one who actually got locked up, shot at, and had his family's home sprayed. Meanwhile, Thug was the one who walked out of jail with time served, dropped an album, and then jumped on a podcast to say that the man who held the line doesn't even have a functioning brain. The streets see it, the culture sees it, and you can bet that Woody sees it too. Before you click off this video, here's what I want you to really think about. In this game of loyalty, who actually held it down? And what does it say about someone when the very first thing they do after gaining their freedom is kick the man who chose not to bury them? That isn't a show of strength, it's a show of fear. And the reason this situation is likely getting dangerous is simple: Woody knows exactly what's happening.